Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the video. Welcome to my garage. In this video, we're going to be making the intake manifold for Wratchet. So there's going to be some complexities to this intake manifold, but at the same time, it's a really basic, generic intake manifold. So let me go over a couple of things. Let me clarify what I'm talking about. First of all, it is going to have a couple of devices on it for the fuel injection. It's going to have a MAP sensor, or a manifold absolute pressure sensor. It's going to have an IAT, or an incoming air temperature sensor. And then it's going to have a little barbed fitting on it so that I can send a little line over to my fuel pressure regulator. The fuel pressure regulator wants to know what the intake manifold pressure is so that it can make some adjustments to the fuel pressure. And then this is my drive-by wire throttle body. That will need to bolt onto the front here. But let me actually take you over to the engine and show you how this will fit on here. So this is where it's going to fit. I'm going to have to make sure that I don't get any wider than my fuel rails here. You can see on the bottom plate here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are going to be the openings for the runners. You can see them. Each of these runners goes down to the cylinder head, and each cylinder has its own. I'm not going to drill these holes yet because if I removed all this material, then when I welded this, it would definitely warp because there wouldn't be any material there. So I've marked all these holes. I've punched the center hole, but now I'm going to weld it up, and then once it's welded up, I'll hole saw these out and clean them up. And then I will weld this up. I'll weld it to that piece, and then you can see at that point it would be trapped. I wouldn't be able to get to the bolts in here, and I wouldn't be able to get to the bolts for the throttle body over here. So I've pre-drilled 2 holes here so that when I have this all welded up, again, I'm not cutting this out first because I don't want to remove all this metal, but when this is all welded up, I'll hole saw here, I'll hole saw here, then I'll drill lines here to make this an opening. I'll use that to get in there and do the nuts and bolts, and then I'll have to make a nice plate that goes on the top of this. But for now, let's take this over, weld it all up, and then at that point we'll come back here and I'll show you what we have to do for all that. So the whole time that I've had this thing mocked up back there, it's been taped together, and it's been like that for over a month. So what I need to do is I've got acetone here, and I'm just wiping down all of the tape residue before I start welding it together, just so that I'm starting with clean surfaces. It doesn't matter, it's still going to be difficult for me to tack together. I don't know why. I always struggle with aluminum, but regardless, starting off with it nice and clean can only help. So here you can see I've already gotten some of it welded together. I usually jump ahead and do some of the welding without the camera, just because adding the camera really slows me down a lot. But at this point, I've got it probably most of the way tacked up. And now that I've got the tacks on there, I'm starting to go around and do some solid welding to it. One thing that's worth noting is I tacked the entire thing together before I start solid welding anything, so that if it's going to pull itself and do any distortion, at least if you have everything tacked together, the distortion's not as bad. So then at this point, I'm just running around and trying to solid weld what I can. I know that on this I started with both ends. I welded those up solid first, and then I ran the long pieces on the top and the bottom. I always feel like I get the most distortion on the long runs, so I feel like it minimizes the distortion if you have the ends welded up first, because it's harder for it to twist that way. I don't know if that's true or not, but whenever I weld stuff like this up, that's typically the way that I do it. Then you can see the welder off to the side there. I had it usually sits on the other side of the garage, but it tripped a breaker, and seems like I got something wrong with that feed, so I had to pull it out and plug into a different outlet. And then after that, of course, while I'm letting things cool down, I go out into the backyard and play around with the dogs. Usually when I go back there, they get excited and they start wrestling with each other, knocking me down, whatever. We're just back there having some fun. And there's Kevin making sure that he didn't hurt me. All right, so here is the intake manifold. It's all welded up all the way around. It's not going to win any beauty contests or anything, but it will be fine. It's super strong. It's made out of 1/8 inch, so it's nice and solid. I did already grind the bottom so that it's flush, because this is going to be where it bolts on to the runners, so that needs to be smooth. That actually feels pretty good though. It didn't really, I might see a little tiny warp, but I think with the gasket and bolting it down, that'll be fine. And I also checked the mating surface of the throttle body. Seems good, and I can't tell if there's room in there for the bolts yet, but I'll know in a second. There's a little bit of clearance between the intake and the fuel rails, so that should work fine. And it clears where the fuel line comes in there, so I think everything will be good there. So that's good. So what I'm going to do now is I need to hole saw the openings on the bottom for the runners, and I need to hole saw here and here, and then jigsaw that so that this is open, and then I can see if the throttle body bolts on and how everything lines up on the bottom there. So that's what I'm going to do now. All right, here I am hole sawing this thing. Because it's aluminum and it's at an angle and all that, it didn't seem like I would be able to put it into the drill press, so I just did it on the floor, which wasn't too bad. I mean, it's 1/8 inch and it's aluminum. Not that hole sawing anything isn't a big deal, but it wasn't too bad just to kind of step on it and hole saw it. And then, of course, this is just more shenanigans with the dogs. There's a lot of this that goes on, actually, that I don't typically get on film, but you know, they're usually back there with me all day, so sometimes I like to play around with them a little bit just to keep things interesting. I got the second hole cut there. I didn't catch that on video, but this is just me running the jigsaw up to cut out this oval-shaped hole. And then this is me drilling out the holes for the intake runners. The hole saws make a pretty rough opening in the aluminum. I mean, it's pretty jagged, but I used a hole saw that was a little bit smaller, so even with the jagged edge, it was pretty small. It was a little bit smaller than the hole needed to be. So when I was done, I brought it up to my drum sander, and I just cleaned up the holes really well, and then I really cleaned them up with the Dremel afterwards just to make sure that they were nice and smooth. All right, now it's the next day. Yes, I am wearing the same shirt. I do that a lot, so that's no big deal. Although this is my garage shirt. What I do is I usually have shirts that I wear in the garage when I'm working out here, and then when I go inside, I usually change my pants and my shirts if I don't shower, just so that I don't have the shop stink. But regardless, it's the next day. I now have the access hole cut into the top here, so I can get my hand in there and, you know, get to the bolts for the throttle body, and I can check the holes and get to the bolts in here for bolting it to the runners and all that stuff. I have also drilled the holes for the runners and it actually fits on the runners very well. It's very accurate, and because these are sucking air right into the engine, after I hole sawed these, I went with a Dremel with a little sanding disc and just went all around these holes and just made them really smooth. I mean, I can run my fingers on there and they are very, very smooth. I also think when this is done, I'm going to coat the inside with something to give it a little bit more protection, but I shouldn't have any pieces flaking off and coming into the engine. I've been very meticulous about keeping this clean. Hey, Kevin. So what I'm doing now is I need a real nice access panel to go on the top here. So if you look, what I've done is I measured this opening, which it's 2.5 inches by 10.5 inches, and then I added an inch all the way around, so I'll have an inch lap here. And then I'm in the process of, I've put masking tape down here and I'm laying this out. I'm going to scribe my arcs here. Then I'm going to cut this out, sand the edges real nice. I'm going to mark some holes around the edge. I'll probably have a whole bunch of 10/32 screws that fasten this in place. And then I'll drill those, and then I'll drill and tap this piece so that all of those bolts are tapped into here. Here I am again with the Milwaukee Jigsaw. Man, I bought this thing like 6 months ago. This thing is, you know, I'm not toting products or anything here, but damn, this Jigsaw, for running such a teeny tiny battery pack, it just goes and goes. I'm constantly shocked at how much metal it'll cut. You can see the battery right there. It's so tiny, but anyways. Now that I got the piece cut out, I'm starting to pre-drill the holes. I have to drill holes in the top plate, and then I have to drill the proper sized hole in the manifold itself for the tap. So what I've done so far is run a pre-drill hole through both pieces. Now at this point, I'm drilling a larger hole for the screws to go through in the top plate. And this is a crazy orchestra of making sure that I don't drill the wrong hole, because there's so many holes and it gets so monotonous. And now at this point, I'm finally tapping it with a 10/32 tap, which is beyond monotonous, but either way, it all actually turned out really well, and the screws do what they need to really well, and they're all pretty much straight. So it did turn out really well, but it's really monotonous. I'm not complaining. I don't mind it, but it is monotonous. And then this is just me doing a trial fit before I actually, you know, take it over and try it on the engine. And then this is me just having some fun with the camera. I'm always trying to get better, more interesting shots, but it gets difficult when you're also fabricating at the same time. But this is just me playing around. All right, now we've done a trial fit, and the throttle body fits on there good. The bolts fit without hitting the side, which is good, and I can access it through the top plate here. Top plate came out nice. These are 10/32 bolts. When I am doing the final buildup, I'm going to buy some nice button head stainless steel bolts for this. But for now, you know, these are just 10/32 that you would get at the hardware store, but that's fine for now. So everything's good here, so I'm going to go bolt it onto the engine and then probably put the throttle body back on, and then at that point I'm going to look and see where I can put the two sensors and the little port for the pressure, for the fuel pressure regulator. So I'm going to take all of this right back apart and put it on the engine. All right, so here we go. This is bolted in place. I only have 2 bolts in there, but you can see that the holes line up real nice with the intake runners and all the bolt holes line up nice. So I'm real happy with that. Throttle body sits up there. It's pointing towards the opening in the shock tower, so I can put my filter up in there. And then I've got my wiring here for the throttle body. That's just, don't have to have that hooked up right now. And then I've got my 3 sensors to go on here, and I think what I'm gonna do, I've got these little bungs that I made to weld on here, and these are an 1/8 inch NPT tap on here. So I think what I'm gonna do, I think I'll weld one right about here, and that'll be for the little elbow here. The elbow will go there, and then I'll just hook a little hose from there right to here. It needs to go to here on the fuel pressure regulator. So I'll have a nice easy hose. It'll be real easy to see where it goes and if it's disconnected or anything like that. And then I've got the incoming air temperature sensor. I'll probably weld a bung right here so that I can weld it up high right there. I think just below that, I'll weld in the bung for the map sensor. I mean, these sensors are a little bit ugly, but you know, they're already going to be right next to the throttle body here, and then I'll have all 3 plugs in the same spot, so I'll be able to just integrate their wiring into this wiring coming from the ECU. I mean, the air temperature one has to be in here. The map sensor, you can always remote that one. I could always make a bracket and run a hose from here to here, because that just needs to read pressure. The temperature one actually has to be in there. But for now, I'm just going to weld some bungs in there, and I'll go with this for now. I don't think it'll look bad once everything's on there. So I'm going to strip this back down and drill those out and then weld in the bungs. Alright, back at the welder. I've got the holes drilled. Now I'm just welding in those bungs for the sensors. Not too much to this. It's actually kind of easier because the metal is so thick. You don't have to worry about burning through it. The only nuisance to this is because it's such thick aluminum, those pieces are like 1/4 of an inch thick. It really takes a lot of heat from the welder to start getting it molten, but aside from that, it's pretty easy welding these in. And then, of course, one more. I mean, I don't know how many times you take things apart and put them back together when you're working on something like this, but I've got to bolt everything back together. Put the fitting in there, put the sensors in there, make sure that everything fits, aligns properly, that nothing moved so that they don't interfere with the hole on the manifold, just all sorts of fitment stuff. There's me showing off my handiwork. And then bolting it on one more time. The only downside of this whole design is when you're bolting it in there, you have to be real careful that you don't drop anything inside the intake. But aside from that, I think this design is really pretty nice. All right, there we go. Pretty much the finished product. I've now got my little fitting here to run a line over to the fuel pressure regulator, so that's good. And I've got a fitting here. This is the air temperature sensor, and this is the manifold pressure sensor. Still not positive if I like this sticking out like a sore thumb, but I'm gonna leave it like this for now. I don't know, I feel like it. The air temperature one doesn't bother me, but I might need to run this like over here and have a hose connecting to it. I don't know. I'll see how I feel about that. It might look different when it has wiring connected to it. But either way, that is it. I will probably do a finish on here. I think I'll probably just sand it so that you don't see the marks from the welding, and this aluminum has some scratches on it. I mean, I could leave it like this, but I think I'll put a finish on it. But I won't do that until I'm ready to start up the engine, because who knows, while I'm doing this fuel injection, if I decide I need to add another sensor on here or remove these or what have you. So I'm not gonna waste a lot of time painting this or sealing it or anything like that until I'm really close to firing up the engine. Same thing with gaskets. I'm not gonna make any gaskets for it until I'm at the point where I'm ready to fire it up. So I am really happy with this. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I'm looking forward to hooking the sensors up to it and stuff like that. However, bear in mind, this is a really crude design. You know, it doesn't have runner lengths taken into account or anything like that. I designed this with the expectation that I'm going to hook a turbo up to it, and that when a turbo pressurizes it, then it will overcome any of the inefficiencies of this design, because this isn't really, it's not really a good design for a naturally aspirated engine. If in naturally aspirated state, this will have less performance than the factory intake manifold. I don't like the factory intake manifold. I didn't want that big contraption sitting on here. If this was going to be naturally aspirated its entire life, I would have thought a little bit differently about that, but my plan is, once I get everything up and going, to put a turbo on here. So I wanted to make a nice, small, robust intake manifold that works with the design of the Baja. And that's what this is. So I'm very happy with this, but I'm not ignorant to the fact that this does not have the same performance as the stock intake manifold when it's naturally aspirated. But either way, guys, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope it's helping you with whatever you're working on, or just entertaining you for a little while. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.